You've heard the name Carthage, right? It just echoes through history. It's this byword for a mighty empire, one that took on Rome itself. But it's also known for a destruction so complete, so total, it became a legend. We're talking about a story of unbelievable power and just absolute obliteration. But here's the thing. The story of Carthage doesn't just end with death. It's also this incredible, kind of mysterious story of rebirth. So you have this cycle: creation, then total destruction, and then recreation. Which leads us to a really fascinating question. Okay, so to really get Carthage, you've got to start with where it was. Let's place it on the map. Right here, on the coast of what is now Tunisia. And you can see its location was absolutely no accident. It was built on this promontory, which meant it could control the sea lanes. I mean, it literally mastered all the trade that crossed the Mediterranean. That's where its power came from. All right, let's go back. Way back to the very beginning, because the story of how this city was founded, it's just as clever as it is legendary. So, the legend goes like this. Queen Dido, who was in exile from Tyre, she makes a deal with the local tribe, and they tell her, sure, you can have as much land as a single ox hide can cover, which doesn't sound like much, right? But here's the genius part. She takes that ox hide and cuts it into these incredibly thin strips. Then she lays them out end to end and manages to circle an entire hill, the hill that would become the very heart of her new city. How clever is that? And get this, the name itself tells you so much. In their own Punic language, it was Carthage, and that translates to new city. It's a constant reminder that this place started as a colony of the great Phoenician city of Tyre. It was literally a new Tyre, but one that was destined to become even bigger and badder than its parent. Okay, so how did this new city go from a clever trick with an oxide to a full-blown Mediterranean superpower? Well, it all came down to its location and that same ingenuity. Just think about this number for a second. 220. That's how many warships Carthage could pack into its military harbor at a single time. I mean, that is staggering. This wasn't just a navy. It was the sharp end of an empire, a tool for projecting power all across the sea. And the heart of all that naval might was this place, the Carthage. It was a man-made, circular military port, completely hidden from the outside world. That circular design was a total game changer, a real innovation. It meant they could get the maximum amount of docking space in a really compact, super defensible area. They could build and repair their warships in these sheltered docks. It was basically a fortress inside a fortress. And you can see here just how central these harbors were to everything in Carthage. The city was built around two huge artificial ports. You had the outer one, which was rectangular and just bustling with trade and commerce. And then you had that inner circular one we just talked about, heavily fortified and strictly for the military. This was a city built from the ground up for two things: making money and making war. But all that power, all that wealth, it was shadowed by a really dark accusation, something its enemies claimed, something that's been whispered about for centuries, a practice that has, pretty grimly, defined its reputation ever since. Yeah, we're talking about child sacrifice. So here's the deal. Archaeologists found this place called the Tophet, which is an ancient cemetery just filled with urns containing the cremated remains of infants. For decades, scholars went back and forth. Was this just a special cemetery for babies who died young, or was it a site for ritual sacrifice? And while there's still some debate, the needle has moved. Recent studies are pointing more and more to the grim reality that, yes, the stories from their enemies were probably true. Child sacrifice seems to have been a part of their culture. So you've got this incredibly powerful, super wealthy, and controversial empire built on sea power. It was just inevitable, really, that they would end up on a collision course with the other big player rising in the Mediterranean, the Roman Republic. And this map really gives you a sense of the scale of what was coming. You've got two titans just staring each other down across the sea. Carthage has North Africa, parts of Spain, all the major islands, and Rome has the Italian peninsula locked down. The Mediterranean, it just wasn't big enough for the both of them. Their struggle was epic, and it played out over 3 huge wars. We call them the Punic Wars. The first Punic War was all about fighting at sea for control of Sicily. The second, that's the one you've probably heard of. That's Hannibal and his elephants crossing the Alps to take the fight straight to Italy. And the third Punic War, that was the end. It was a final, brutal siege with only one goal: total annihilation. The way it all ended was so brutal, so infamous, that it actually gave us a new phrase. If you ever hear the term Carthaginian peace, just know it doesn't mean peace at all. It means a peace treaty that is really just the complete and utter crushing of your enemy. It's peace through obliteration. And that term, Carthaginian peace, leads us right to the final, horrific days of Punic Carthage, back in 146 BC. Okay, so after a siege that went on for almost 3 long years, the Romans finally smashed through the city's massive walls. And they didn't just conquer it, no. They systematically obliterated it. They burned it to the ground, they pulled it down stone by stone, leaving almost nothing. This great Mediterranean superpower was just gone, reduced to a field of rubble. 50,000. Think about that number. That's how many Carthaginian citizens are thought to have survived that final, brutal assault. And what happened to them? They were rounded up and sold into slavery. An entire population just wiped from the map. So that leads to one of the most famous stories about the fall of Carthage, right? The idea that the Romans literally salted the earth to make sure nothing would ever grow there again. But did that actually happen? Well, it's an incredibly powerful image of total destruction, isn't it? But that's all it is, an image, a symbol. The truth is, there's no evidence from any ancient sources that this ever happened. Not a single ancient historian mentions it. The whole legend of salting the earth was invented much, much later, probably to make an already horrific event sound even more dramatic. So the story should end right there, a field of rubble, a cursed and empty piece of land. But incredibly, that's not the end of the story, not even close. This was not the final chapter for Carthage. Get this, about a century after it was wiped off the map, none other than Julius Caesar ordered a new city to be built on the very same spot, and Roman Carthage rose from the ashes and became a huge success. It grew to be the second largest city in the entire Western Roman Empire. But history has a way of repeating itself. It was eventually conquered by the Vandals, then taken back by the Byzantine Empire, and then, in 698 AD, it was destroyed again, a second and final time, by Umayyad forces who wanted to make sure the Byzantines couldn't use it as a foothold. So when you go there today, the ruins you see are like these layered ghosts of 2 different great empires, Punic Carthage and Roman Carthage, and they're lying right next to a modern bustling suburb of Tunis. The past and the present are literally side by side. And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating final thought. A city can be physically erased, right? Not just once, but twice. Its people can be killed or scattered to the winds. And yet, the idea of Carthage, its legends, its power, its epic rivalry with Rome, that idea has turned out to be more resilient than stone. It survived for over 2,000 years. It just goes to show you, maybe a city is so much more than just its walls.